The best leader, I think, is somebody who really understands things from everybody's perspective and knows how to influence them and chart the course to that next great place. And there could be 1,000 different ways of getting to that next place.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Conductor's Podcast. I'm your host, Chao Ting, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you back, as always, to the newest episode. Today, I'm talking to a very special conductor who was born in Australia, did conducting study in the UK, and then came to the United States and had their career mostly in the United States. For about a decade, actually a little more than a decade, this conductor held 3 music director positions with 3 different orchestras in the United States in different states. For most of the time, they had at least 2 positions at once. And of course, now they had settled into just having 1 position. But this decade of managing multiple orchestras, being devoted to different communities while raising 3 human beings had not been easy. And it was such a wonderful interview and chat where my guest, you probably guessed, Sarah Ioannides, shared with us her story managing the many different challenges along the way. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the show, Sarah. I'm so thrilled to have you here on the Conductor's Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me.
It's a real pleasure to meet you and been looking forward to sharing some thoughts. Thanks for inviting me.
So before we get started, I always ask my guests this question. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you get to where you are? Just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I started by playing a number of instruments when I was young. I played piano, French horn, and violin, and I could never quite decide among them which one I really wanted to focus on. So I just actually seem to continue to add different instruments to my slate, violin and viola and singing, and even for a while, guitar and saxophone. So clearly a lot of experimenting going on. But I started conducting when I was in the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain. I was about 16, 17 when I took interest, then decided to pursue a degree at Oxford University where I could actually really focus on conducting, because in addition to your academic studies, you can conduct the university orchestras or the college orchestras, because most people are focused on other subjects other than music. So there's just a huge pool of people who are doing music, whether they're musicians or non-majors. And so then I had an orchestra really from the age of 18 on, and an opera company, and worked with a lot of different musicians early, but decided to really continue my studies all alongside for the next 10 years to focus on conducting. I went on to really focus with private lessons and study with Otto Werner Müller at Curtis and the Juilliard School.
So that's what's brought you to the United States, right? So you already had conducting experience, as you said, at Oxford, and you just wanted to study with Müller, and that's what brought you to the States?
Yeah, I had done about 3 years at Oxford, and then I went on to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama for 1 year conducting studies. And then I actually started working as conductor for another year, while I tried to audition and get to go to Curtis and Juilliard, which took me about 3 years, because the first time I wasn't accepted. But he said, if you come back next year and if you're ready, then I'll take you if you're ready. It was a big if. So I actually didn't go back for 3 years to audition, because I wanted to make sure I was ready. And I had too many conflicts with the auditions those few years.
So that's a thing that we hear a lot kind of throughout the course of our career, when you want to take a position when you're ready, or be present when you're ready. What is that being ready to you back then?
Well, for me back then, that was about timing. Literally, I had engagements that conflicted with the auditions, but I also needed to take time to really just focus on everything that was required for those entrance exams, which are very difficult. And so I wanted to have a 3-month period where I could shut everything down and just work on my conducting skills. I mean, I think it's, as you say, it's an important parallel. What is it to being ready? So I think you have a feeling inside you when you know you're ready for the next stage. You know that you've sort of conquered the level that you're at and you're ready for more and or a different repertoire or a different setting. So yeah, internal development keeps happening. And that was always my goal actually, is not just to have in mind a specific orchestra or place to study. It was really to continue to evolve and develop artistically inside.
I think that's a really lovely thing about connecting. Like we always are growing and are learning. So, do you mind sharing a little bit about your experience with Mueller and maybe how that had influenced you? Now you are also teaching and mentoring, I know, through the Julia, and then also you have your own conducting program. How is it like now you're also teaching? And of course, you reflect on your mentors and your experience, which we'll touch on later about your experience being music directors for different orchestras.
Yeah, so I draw upon not just Otto Werner Muller, but my studies also in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I had a number of summers studying with George Hurst at Camford Summer School of Music. And I think in addition to that, when I was assistant conductor at Cincinnati Symphony, I watched a lot of conductors. I sat in the hall. Every conductor who came in, I tried to see where they were heading, what worked about what they did, and of course, accumulate repertoire, which was, a 12-year process of really, really developing a repertoire list. And that's a list I'm still expanding upon. But when I teach now, I'm drawing upon the experience in all of those different settings. 4 years with Otto Werner Muller, where we really studied about structure, of course, technique too, but mostly about how to really be prepared for the job on the podium. And I think probably that was the best training. Many of the other conductors I studied with, it was more, could have been a musical direction or it could have been a technical direction. But Otto Werner Muller really prepared you to work very hard, to really think carefully about how you're going to approach the piece, how you're going to be ready for the piece, how you're going to be ready for the musicians, what needs to be done in terms of parts, preparation, just insights. And then in terms of other repertoires, been gathering of ideas and musical ideas and ways of doing things. And of course, that you really have to decide and discover for yourself. So the map, I'd say, with Otto Werner Muller was not locking you into any one interpretation, but giving you the foundation skills to be able to go to that next level.
That is lovely to hear because, as you say, some teachers are very score studying oriented or like talk a lot about the structure, about the piece. Some are very particular about techniques. But as you say, being prepared for the job is a little different from either side. It's kind of more holistic in a way, if you would say.
Yeah, it's a mindset, really. It's a mindset and attitude, and also it takes some of the ego away. I mean, we all know to be conductor, you can have to be pretty confident and have strong will, strong opinions, but this idea of, I suppose, removing the ego from it and being extremely open to recognizing how it would be from any person's standpoint in the orchestra, whether it's the back of the orchestra, somebody who comes in as a substitute at the last minute, somebody who would like to know more detail about how to play the phrase, how to prepare all of these things in advance. So, yeah, it's really about thinking of it not only from your own perspective, but from other people's.
So it seems like, please correct me if I was wrong, because I was reading about you as preparation for our interview. And it sounds like after your study with Mueller, you very quickly took the position as assistant with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. And then from there, you had the music directorship with two orchestras, like very soon after you finished your term with Cincinnati. How was it like kind of climbing up the ladder one after another? Did you feel that you were prepared landing the two big positions? And it was 2005 with El Paso and then also Spartanburg Philharmonic.
Yeah. So a while ago, and of course, when you prepare to be a conductor, you're not necessarily prepared to take on the music director role. So that's a steep learning curve. And all of a sudden, you have two sets of several hundred people to get to know. So you have, of course, the orchestra, the board, the staff, the patrons, the marketing, the press, the sponsors, the corporations. Yeah, it's kind of a big undertaking to do that with two orchestras at the same time. It was kind of exciting, but also getting to know them and also trying to get to know the community and figure out what is the right key to making this organization and this orchestra thrive. What is it needs at this point? And so that takes time to really understand the history. I think any leader who takes on any kind of organization needs to understand and do due diligence to really get to know the organization's background. And that takes time because it's not easily revealed. It's not all in one document. It's through conversations. And then really going about aligning vision with the board, with the orchestra, and meeting of the minds and looking at what the potential is and what perhaps the growth is, where the strengths and weaknesses are, and what will make this orchestra embedded in the community in a different way. And that's quite a lot of what my focus has been in these orchestras, is really working out how to connect the dots within the orchestra to the community, to the schools, to the arts organizations. And so I focused a lot on collaborations, and it's sort of become a passion of mine to tailor what the orchestra does to the place. So it's sort of like a place setting. It's not just taking great musical repertoire and putting it into a season. Of course, you have to do that as well, but it's far more beyond that. I see that role as music director. And then that's what I've been doing also in Tacoma since I've been here for 8 years.
Yeah, because like as you describe it, I realized the actual part of conducting or like what our training is about, repertoire, rehearsal seems to be a rather small part of your job as a music director, because you talk about, kind of really understanding where this organization is in this community, what it represents, where it's going. And it feels like much more broader, and it was very different from a lot of the conducting training, would you say?
Yeah, I'm sure there are many music directors also looking at it in this light. But again, I think that comes back to the approach that perhaps I learned from Otto Werner Müller. This is not just about yourself conducting. This is about partnerships, relationships, looking at the whole organization, not just the conductor, from the outside in, and figuring out the right next steps, how to build upon this and how to grow. I think any conductor, wherever you go, you want to leave an impression, a lasting impression, a positive impression. You want to not only conduct well, but you want to have this be a memory that sticks with people, because quite often we don't video or record performances, or we go and we have a performance and then it's gone. So how to make this a lasting impact, whether it's a guest engagement or relationships you make with the people there, or whether it's a deeper partnership, I think is much more satisfying than just going in and you say, okay, now I've conducted XYZ piece, that's great. Now we all played this concert. But really to see, okay, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And what do we want to get out of it? Both personally, organizationally, and to have a deeper approach. And it's quite hard to have those conversations in advance. So that's what's very satisfying, actually, about even when you make an application for a music director search, you quite often have to look at the organization. You have to think about the vision. You have to think about what your vision is and what you want as well, and make sure that aligns.
Since you mentioned the application and the selection side, do you mind talking to us about how this selection process worked like, or what kind of preparation that you had to do?
So I think you mean for music director positions?
Yes.
Yeah, so they do change, of course, but the obvious, of course, you have to have your materials in line. You need your resume, this cover letter. Cover letter is very important, I think, to write this with understanding of the organization and the job that you're making the application for, so that you can tailor it and it's as specific as possible. Of course, you have things that you're going to share regardless, because that's your output, that's important to you. But also what you write is going to be very revealing about what you care about and how you've made your mark so far, whether it's your personal philosophy or your understanding of the role of an orchestra in its community, or what are the things that you care about and how have you made steps towards showing that it's more than caring about it, it's actually doing something in this direction. References, of course, everybody needs references, and I think it's important to consider not just a stock standard list of references, recommendations, but have the right references for the right job and make sure it's somebody who is really able to speak comprehensively about your work, whether it's from a conducting perspective, from a management perspective, from the organization perspective, or even an influential person in the community who's watched the impact of your work on the community. And then, of course, we all need to show that we can conduct, and having good audiovisual materials can be a challenge to get, especially if you're with a union orchestra. But I would say record as much as you can, as often as you can, whether or not it's for a job application. It's for you to get better and for you to understand how to also take the orchestra to the next level. So I'm always listening a lot and watching a lot to footage of our performances.
Of course. And as you say that as a music director, how you see your job is to really place it, like kind of have a vision for it. So it seems like you have at least 2 orchestras at the same time for the past decade, that you're a music director for at least 2 orchestras. And do you travel between them? And how do you feel that you can really, since you are splitting your time, how do you really go into the community, or do you just do as much as you can while you are in residence and do the same for the other organization?
Yeah. So initially I had 2 orchestras, El Paso and Spartanburg, and then Spartanburg and Tacoma. But for the last few years, I've just been focusing on Tacoma. So I've sort of been overlapping so that there is some time where you can just give one orchestra the focus and doing some guest conducting as well. In terms of the juggling, when I had 2 orchestras, there's quite complicated. When you're in one place, you're still working for the other place. It's really trying to remove any barriers. Of course, when I'm in rehearsals or concerts for one orchestra, I'm fully with them. And usually the orchestra who I'm not with is good about leaving you alone, the concert week. But quite often, I might need to prepare materials or check press releases or give some quotes or have an interview when I'm not in the city where I'm going. And so managing your schedule is one of the biggest challenges, I think, to managing a lot of work, whether it's music director position where you also need to protect your study time, because very quickly your time can go all the other places, and you need to be able to get on the podium and really focus on the musical aspects. So being able to manage your barriers and your time is very important. I am not very good at boundaries for myself, but it's also sheerly a huge amount of work often. So I answer emails in the middle of the night. If I need to, I will get up early and be in different time zone, doing things, because especially if I'm in Europe, then I need to be able to have some office working hours so that I can communicate with staff when they're at their office, because quite often staff have very specific hours, whereas as a music director, you don't keep office hours. So that can become quite difficult, because you end up doing office hours plus doing your musical job outside of those hours and working weekends and nights and, et cetera, and traveling. And if you have a family like I do, then that's just you're doing two jobs. You're doing a lot more. And so learning how to manage your time and set things up. I'm often working weeks, months, and sometimes years ahead to really think, okay, how's this going to work? And what support do I need to be able to do this?
I remember reading about you years ago. I don't remember where that article was from, but it talked about your traveling schedule and your music directorship with different orchestras. And then there was a picture of you and your family. I think you held hand with your little kids. I think the background was in probably an airport of like you.
I know the picture. In fact, I know that precise picture because I had somebody else in the airport take that picture, because I was pushing a stroller, and in the stroller were my twins, who were about 4 or 5 months, and my older daughter, who was about 2, sitting on the double stroller, and then all of the luggage in the bag on the back and inside the stroller. And I was passing. I don't usually take pictures at this kind of time because, one looks absolutely awful and you're exhausted and you're just trying to keep babies happy and get from A to B, which is not very easy with 3 young children. I usually tried not to travel on my own, but in this case, this time specifically, I was going between El Paso and Spartanburg, and I passed the body shop, and it was a Mother's Day. It was in May. It was around, I was trying to do the final concerts of the season with both orchestras. And so it was Mother's Day, and I think they had this big display saying something like, for the mother of them all, or something. And, you could purchase all these wonderful, gorgeous products to make mothering feel a bit better. And so I was in the stroller passing the body shop. And of course, not having time to go in and shop or do anything for oneself. But it was quite funny that here I was with these 3 kids, and quite often when you get on planes with little children, people will say, "Oh, so cute kids." And I think this was one of the times where people actually put their bags down and say, "Hey, look, you need help. Let me carry one of these children," because, you get them on the planes and they're sleeping, and I have 2 in one lap and a 2-year-old next to me. And you try to wake them up to go to the next destination, and you've got all your scores. You're trying to study at any possible moment, and trying to make sure you've got everything packed up and try not to wake the babies. Yeah, you need help. I wouldn't recommend doing that alone, ever. But anyway, that's the picture you're talking about. That's the story behind it.
Yes. And then I am a mom too. I have 2 girls, and I am just now getting busier, kind of where in my career that I start to travel more, because when they're little, I tried not to. It's not always easy, but there are only so many choices that you can make. But I was wondering, do you always travel with the families? How do they adjust to being in different places? And then I understand from my own experience, when they were little, they were little challenges as they get to entertain the babies. But once they are in schools, was it difficult or challenging, or did you homeschool them? Do you mind talking about that?
Sure. Happy to talk about it. The other complication that I bring to the table is that my husband is working and living in a different city than I have had my music director position. So the schedule that we worked out meant that I would not always be with the kids. Of course, when they were very young, yes, they would come with me mostly when they were very little. But then I would draw out, usually 6 to 12 months in advance, who has to be where when, with my concert schedule, Scott's concert and schedule. And I'd plug in all of the dates. And then I would come up with scenario A, B, and C at least by counting how many days each of us would be with the children and how many days they'd each be in each place, because we were tri-city schooling, if you know what that means. I mean, it would be literally, they were in 3 school districts in 3 different cities. So we were going to a school in Tacoma, a school in Connecticut, and a school in South Carolina. And this happened through a lot of dialogue and discussion and conversation with each of those districts. And then for them taking school work, of course, the older they get, the more work they have. So though the little problems are very time absorbing for young kids, when they get older, then of course they want to be in ballet and sports. And I really wanted my kids to have as normal a childhood as possible, despite the fact that it was definitely not normal to be living and going in and out of schools. And so for them, going to school and then finding out that they no longer could sit next to their friend, or that people were like, well, where have you been? I mean, how come you get to just kind of disappear and come back? And, so it's kind of complicated for them as well. But we did this for many, many years. But then as they got older, I decided to make home base in Tacoma, and they're in a wonderful school district. And pretty much I travel and they stay here, and I make sure my husband can be here. But the other huge part about this is that we hired au pairs for many, many years. We had wonderful au pairs, and so they would help particularly around concert and travel time, helping pack and get ready. And, I think you have to make decisions about how you're going to manage it. And we just invested in help and help with me being pretty hands-on, involved in the management of how are we going to do it and who we need to have those conversations with, because the schools needed to be in agreement. And it kind of meant going through doors that would not usually be open, making calls, going to head of school districts, explaining what I do, explaining why we can't live in one place, and then having them help me figure out and find a way to make it work. Sometimes it meant paying for private schools or prorating. Yeah, it was very, very complicated. So they went to a lot of different schools, and they learned to become very flexible and adaptable. And they're very happy in one place now, but I don't know how I would have them in different schools the last few years, because they are now 12, and 14. And they have their friends, and friends are really important at that age. So I think we got away with it as long as we could. But it was about 2017, 5 years ago, they've more or less lived in one place as opposed to 2 or 3 places.
Did you feel that you had made different decisions about your career because of family or otherwise, or you just were too busy managing all the schedules?
Well, I mean, absolutely. When you have a family, you just have to think differently. It didn't make my passion and desire to be a conductor change at all. But, you're no longer thinking about only yourself. I mean, I think whenever you enter in some kind of relationship or partnership with somebody and agree to commit to life together, then you have to make accommodations, and you can't sort of carry on footloose and fancy free. And so then when you have children, there's more people. And so you're sharing your life with more people, and little people are really, really important how they turn out. And so there's no doubt that as a mother, I have spent a huge, especially trying to keep my schedule going, spent huge amounts of time waking and sleeping about how to manage the next day, the next hour, the next year, the next 6 months, and where do I want to be in my career in 3 years from now. I also had Lyme disease for a few years, and that was another big challenge while my kids were little. Was okay, and that actually made me decide to leave El Paso. I decided that if I was going to keep looking forward, I needed to just focus in a different way on something that was going to be better for me. So then I had Spartanburg on its own, and throughout it, keeping up guest conducting. So it's been a really incredible 14, 15 years. It's just been amazing. And I'd say that who knows what's coming next, but I think that everybody has sacrificed, or at least, some things you can't do it all. You just can't. You have to make decisions. And I'm so thankful for the people who helped me be able to keep my career going while I had a family. Because I think for a lot of people, it's just terrifying and frightening how on earth you would be able to do it, because the culture of a conductor, first of all, being a woman is not there. And second of all, being a woman with a family is also very, very new. I didn't take maternity leave. I didn't have any job security. Agents and managers and orchestras were skeptical. No doubt, oh, you have a family now, and, let's see how that goes. So decisions were made for me, and I had to also cut back and maybe put my own personal ambitions on hold a little bit, which I think is fair to say. It was a combination of decisions I made, but also decisions that the industry kind of made at that time. And I think it was all right. It was all good. I'm happy where I am. I'm very excited about what's coming up, and I don't know where I'll be in 5 years. Put it like that.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you these questions because when I was in Paris earlier this year, in March, for the Maestra competition for all women, and of course we stayed in the same hotel, so we had a breakfast chat all together. So one of the very young participant, I think she was maybe just finishing a master's degree, so she was still a student. She was newly wed. She was asking all the other moms, like, okay, how is it to have kids? Because she just got married, very looking forward to have a career and babies. And what would you say to any of the young women and men? I think men should take responsibility too, for sure, looking to start a family and also continuing to grow in their career.
I would say that there are going to be many, many times where you think that you can't do it anymore, that it's just too difficult. And that, you might think people have no idea. They have no idea how difficult it is. And that you have to allow those days to be those days, and that you have to make the most of the other days where you are just so thrilled because you get to be a mom, you get to take care of young lives, and you get to go on the podium. I mean, it's amazingly fulfilling and deeply gratifying to be able to do it, but it is not easy. And I think the support system is not there yet. I think you have to be creative and figure out how you are going to make this work. I mean, I think there are many, many challenges in life. And I think you have to go in with a problem-solving attitude, with a positive attitude, with a can-do kind of approach, and being willing and ready to make choices, make sacrifices. And that might mean, you no longer do certain things that you used to do and love. Actually, I've recently, the last 5 years since I've lived more or less in one base. We still have a home on the East Coast, and I still travel a lot. But now I have like a regular doctor I can see in one place. And so I started running because I've always loved it, and I wanted to do something to physically keep myself strong. So I've taken something back, but there were a good number of years where, one's personal self has to be, you take care of your health, but, you don't have time to watch movies. You don't have time to go see your friends. You don't have time sometimes to make phone calls to people you used to make phone calls. And, that can be hard. So you have to become extremely focused, very determined, and willing and able to make sacrifices to be able to do this, I think. And it's just great if you can. It's not going to be for everyone. But yeah, I love your comment that the guys have to support us. Fortunately, I married somebody who's very, very committed and supporting. And he has his own career, and he, as I said, he lives partly on the East Coast, and we're used to this lifestyle because we've been doing it for a while. Yeah, I think a conductor's often on your own, and so
Yes.
it's a good.
Yes, I remember
studying to do so.
Yeah, I remember when I was conductor fellow with the Rochester Phil. There was one year they had the music director search. It's not announced, but we kind of knew everyone coming to guest conduct is one of the candidates because they are in need of a new director. So one of them, I was still a student back then. One of them, as I went and talked to them, and one conductor asked me, "Are you sure you really want to do it?" I said, "Yeah, why?" I'm excited and just starting a new school year. He's like, "This is very lonely. It's mostly just you and your score in a hotel room trying to figure things out." And that scared me. I was like, whoa, that's the part I didn't think about. But I love what you said. I felt like it's a lot about what we do in general, like going in and know what you have, what you don't have, what you can have, what you can't have, and try to make the best out of it, no matter any rehearsal or, yeah.
Yeah, I think my father said that too. He's a conductor and a composer. He said, it's kind of a lonely job. But you know what? I think the job has changed so much, especially if you're a music director. There are so many people to meet and talk with and engage with and figure out how the orchestra needs to get into the community here. I do not. I mean, it should be lonely so that you can get your score study in, but there's also so many people to engage with, and especially if you do collaborations and community projects, which I'm very passionate about, then you also have to learn your scores really fast. You have to be super, and that's where I will always thank my teachers, Otto Werner Müller in particular, because I can learn pretty fast because I have a really good system of learning scores, and that training of having a good ear, being able to score read, being able to go to the piano. And just it's accumulative. The more scores you learn, the more you understand the next one. So that's also beneficial. And nowadays I can go back to pieces I've done many, many times, as well as, I add new repertoire, but doing something for the first time is still always kind of a bit scary.
Would you say that's also true when you do collaborations? Because when you are collaborating with others, of course, exciting, but then there are more joints in this production and more things can go wrong or more things that you have to take care of. How is it like? And I know you do a lot of those multimedia and they kind of like multidisciplinary, in a sense, performances.
Yeah. definitely requires just a lot of time input. I'm doing a project right now. This is the second year of something called Eternal Light. It's a multi-arts, it's a community collaboration with students from, the age of 8 through 18. And we have 40 artworks, a film director, an orchestrator, a co-producer. I also do video editing and orchestrating and putting pieces together. So I've got to also manage a rehearsal schedule for kids for this production as well. And it's really, really exciting, but it's an awful lot in addition to what is not necessarily in my job description. And so you take whatever measures you need to make sure that the project's seen through correctly and in the way that you want it to be. So again, it comes down to putting yourself outside of yourself and saying, okay, what needs to be done here in order for this to work from everybody else's perspective. So I love that. Conductor's always in the middle, but I always try to take the conductor out of the middle and be transparent, be totally out of it so that everything else can connect and take responsibility to make sure everything does connect. But then try to be, as I said, see through, that you're not in the way, because I think conductors are quite often in the way. That's not the way conductors should be, in my opinion.
Yes, we are often getting in the way without knowing it. Until you're much older and mature and also kind of self-confident to take yourself out of the picture. Sometimes I feel it takes a lot of courage to take yourself out of it. So to wrap up our conversation, what is the biggest thing that you learned over the years that you can share with my audience, or something to kind of watch out for?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to know not only your art, but to know the community that you're in. In order to help it thrive, you need to understand it. And I think self-understanding is critical. I think self-placement is critical, that we talked about that, but also recognizing what you can do to make everything else connect. I've found that I think it's really what we're saying before, is to initiate everything, to be responsible and follow up for everything, but try to put oneself out of it so that everything else functions. And that's really about relationship building as well. Communications and leadership skills. The best leader, I think, is somebody who really understands things from everybody's perspective and knows how to influence them and chart the course to that next great place. And there could be 1,000 different ways of getting to that next place. So prioritizing, having a really good management system, all of those management skills will help you be a great leader. But in order to influence and affect change, you need to get on the same page as everybody else and then steer. So I would say the more you understand what you want to do and what the other people in the room or in the community, where they want to go with this, the more you'll be able to affect change, because change only really happens with teamwork, I think. So I'd like to leave you with that. How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful. And thank you so much. I'll put this in the show notes, but I wanted my listener to hear it from you. So if they wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure. Well, I think you mentioned at the beginning, I run a workshop for conductors, but also composers, so cascade conducting. But I have my website, sarahioannidesmusic.com, and people can reach me through the website. I also have YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and through the orchestra. So should be easy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talking with you.
The interview with Sarah was one of the most touching experiences that I had for the Conductor's podcast. Of course, all my guests are very, very genuine, and they're so generous with their time and opening up to share their stories with us. But what Sarah said about the moment when you just think that it's so difficult that you can't do it anymore really, really touched me. I'm sure almost everyone had those moments, if not one or two or many of them, because sometimes things are just not going well. Sometimes we just don't see any light coming through at all, but that's what it is, and we have just to make the best out of it. And I recently started listening to a podcast called Mike on the Podium. It's a podcast interviewing many, many world-renowned, mostly opera and orchestra conductors. And in one of the episodes with Robert Spano, who is just finishing his term as the music director of the Atlanta Symphony, where I am based, and going to Fort Worth, Texas, for his new position with the Fort Worth Symphony. And the host, Mike, I think he goes by Mike, asked Spano, so what is special about being the music director for an American orchestra? And Spano said that as a music director for any American orchestra, he feels it's very special that you have to be prepared to go into the community and really be the face of the organization. You have to really go in and understand what your organization and what your ensemble represent, what you're serving, where you're going with and within this community, which was different from many, many other different places or his other experiences conducting in Europe or in somewhere else in the world, which I felt really echoed what Sarah just shared. Since we don't have such a strong tradition of a government-supported arts organizations and performing arts activities, it's really important to understand why we still want or need those performing arts organizations. Why do we need 5 or 10 different community orchestras here, say, in the metro Atlanta areas? Because they serve different people, different community, and that's why you are different from your, not just competitors, but to really understand where you stand and where you're going to. I hope that what she said about her experience sheds some light for you, and I can't wait for seeing you next week at the same time, same place. Take care and bye for now.